Good evening. Last night I went into Bristol with Bex to the Lantern, and we watched a band called My Baby play. And they was a complete unknown. It was on a whim. I think on Tuesday night I came back from work and Bex was having a little boogie in the kitchen to some music, a band I'd never heard of before. And she said, "Oh, it's a band called My Baby. Get this, they are a Dutch, New Zealand sort of psych blues dance band. Brilliant. And I love the sound of it. And it turned out they were playing at the Lantern Room in the Beacon. And so I made a few calls, got some tickets. Thank you, Joe, for sorting out the tickets. And off we went last night with sort of no expectations. I didn't know really anything about the band or what the music was going to be like. And quite honestly, got to be genuinely honest here, I've been in the music industry for whatever it is, 20, 30 years or something. And I'm not saying I'm cynical, but I've seen a lot of very good stuff. Last night may just be the best gig I've ever been to in my life, partially possibly because it was completely unexpected. So, three-piece band and a drumming singer, or is it a singing drummer? I'm not sure. He was kind of the lead vocalist at times. And then a vocalist who is his sister and plays guitar and bass, and a guitarist. So three-piece, huge sound. Anyway, I'm not telling you this to tell you about my night last night. What I wanted to speak about was something I talk about at work a little bit, actually, and it's that sometimes technical skill can be kind of misconstrued as creative skill. So just because somebody is good at an instrument or they have some technical skill, say with a football, doesn't mean they are a good footballer. So last night, the individual members of the band on a technical level were mind-blowing. So good drummer, great guitarist, great bass player, great singers. But that doesn't always make great music. And what I often talk about at work is that the technique element of playing an instrument is like vocabulary. So the words that we learn when we're young are quite limited. So if a 3-year-old is trying to express themselves, they might only be able to tell you that they're hungry, but they can't tell you possibly what food they're after, or even whether it's sweet or savoury thereafter. So it can be a case of frustration that they can't sort of make themselves known. But as we get older, we increase our vocabulary and we get better at being able to speak. And it's the same with music. When we're talking, we aren't thinking about sentences and spelling and syntax and things like that. But I think a lot of musicians are. I think they kind of see it as a kind of, a test or a kind of puzzle they're trying to put together of kind of notes and things. So, if we go back to the English language thing, there are people that have spent years kind of learning very clever words and becoming very adept at knowing a huge level of vocabulary, and they go out of their way to kind of make sure you know about it. And I find some musicians are like this. They have a technical skill and a desire to kind of show it off. What I talk about at university is trying to make sure that people are less good drummers and are better musicians. So the minute you are a better drummer than you are a musician, you're not really very good at making music. You're a very good drummer. And there are plenty of great drummers out there but aren't great musicians. They're technically adept on the instrument. They know all the vocabulary. They've got all these clever words. And when they speak, they say all these clever words and everybody goes, wow, you're really good at speaking. But actually, when you listen to the sentences, it's just garbage. It doesn't really make any sense. And then you've got these drummers and guitarists and bass players that aren't necessarily technically adept, and yet when they speak, my God, it's amazing. Think about, the greats that have the combination of the two, the great orators, Churchill and Malcolm X, etc. Great orators, great vocabulary, amazingly adept at speaking. And then you've got people day to day that are able to make themselves very clearly known, but they don't have a wide vocabulary. And you've got people that have got a very wide vocabulary, but when they speak, they're not really saying anything. And it's exactly the same in music. Like I say, when we're talking, we're not thinking about the technicalities of sentence construction, syntax and spelling and stuff like that. We just speak, and it should be the same when you're playing music. My opinion is that when I meet somebody and they ask what I do, I tell them I'm a musician. I don't tell them I'm a drummer. It would be the same as kind of meeting somebody in a bar and them telling you that they were a midfielder or a goalkeeper. It would be a weird thing to do. They don't goalkeep for a living. They play football. I don't drum for a living. I play music. And I think that's the thing. So I think the reason why this happens, there's a disconnect between kind of technique and music, is that quite often a lot of the people that teach an instrument maybe don't have a great deal of music experience. They have a lot of instrumental experience. So therefore they kind of teach technique as a means to an end. Look at all these fancy, clever words. So you're able to say loads of fancy, clever words, but there's often a disconnect between that and the act of making music. Anyway, that was not the case last night. The band that we watched were, I don't know, there are very few bands on the planet that I've been privileged to see that have that balance of musicianship skills and also instrumental skills. Two bands that leap to mind are Portishead and Rage Against the Machine. And last night was just that. It was a fantastic experience. I'm really glad that it was a total whim, and I'm glad that we managed to go, and it was a fantastic night. And that's all I wanted to say, really, at this juncture. And boxing, I messed up. Apparently the sparring is only once a month, so I had to do my own boxing session out in the rain. I felt proper hardcore. And actually, as a result of that, I don't know if you can see this, if you recognise this frame, I thought it was time indeed that I sat down of an evening and watched Fight Club, because it's probably been a fair few decades since I've actually watched it. So what I'm thinking about really is that just try and remember that technique is a means to an end, not an end itself. And that really they're just composite bits of being able to be creative with things, rather than the skill of a drummer being in their drumming skills. It should be in their musicianship skills. Anyway, goodbye. I'll see you tomorrow.